Through primary and secondary succession for you on time lapse, which you saw just a second ago. Now I'm going to walk you through it and explain what's going on and put in some labels. So let's start with primary succession. Here, bare rock, okay? Primary succession always starts with bare rock. Mechanical weathering, this rock is going to start to break up. Water gets down there and it freezes and it cracks it and things like that. It's going to start to break into very, very large rocks and smaller rocks. Then we're going to start to have big rocks toward the bottom, a small matrix of rocks and pebbles and things, and then we're going to get something growing on the rocks here. These are called lichens. Lichens begin to grow. And lichens are important because they are a soilless, they don't need soil, soilless pioneer species that does the entire, all the biogeochemical cycling within themselves. They don't need bacteria in the soil because they are a symbiotic being. It's a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and a photosynthetic bacteria. Okay, now as those lichens grow and then die and then grow and die and grow over the top of each other and things like that, weathering is still going on. This mechanical weathering is breaking it down, breaking down the big rocks, and that really becomes a formation of a very, very shallow soil. Now that soil is made up of bacteria and dead lichens that are decomposing and things like that. Bacteria and fungi are incredibly important. At this point, we can have some very, very shallow rooted grasses that have these fibrous roots. As time goes on, the soil gets deeper, a subsoil starts to form before you hit the rock. And then we can have some of our flowering plants, our herbaceous vegetation coming in. The grasses are getting taller. Over more time, the soil gets deeper still, and the big rocks have broken up. The bedrock is down deep, and there's a subsoil. And this, we're talking about a soil that's a foot or more deep, a couple of feet deep now. And then we're going to start to see some woody vegetation come in that's actually climbing up above the stems of these flowers and grasses. This part here, from bare rock all the way to where we've got some soil, this could take easily 1,000 years or more. Because that breaking of rock, that mechanical weathering takes forever. But now it's starting to race, okay? Once we've got woody vegetation on the scene, once we've got woody stems, it can really start to chase that sunlight and go up and up and up. Then we're going to get small trees. They're usually going to be conifer trees or juniper trees of some sort. So, like here it would be like loblolly pine in East Texas. Around here it's probably going to be eastern red cedar, which is a type of juniper tree, or maybe something like mesquite, which is not a juniper or a pine tree, but it is a pioneer species. This looks differently wherever it happens, but I'm just talking to you through East Texas. So now we're going to get a young pine forest, a whole forest, very, very thick with our young pioneer trees. And you notice the grasses and shrubs are all gone now because those grasses and shrubs were not shade tolerant. There was nothing shading them out. Now that the trees have come in, they've shaded out all those other competing vegetation. Except for these. Now we've got shade tolerant. Shade tolerant species that are growing up underneath it. Now we're going to go over here. Now the shade tolerant species are starting to get pretty big now. They're getting just as big as the pioneers were. And then eventually those get over the top of those pioneer trees and shade them out. Now we're at our climax community. Remember, a community is all the populations in a given ecosystem, right? So when I say the plant community, that's all the different plants. When I say the climax community, we're talking about all the plants and trees that make up this community of species that will last forever unless there's a disturbance. Boom, got a disturbance, forest fire. We've got a disturbance there, forest fire. Now all that's left is soil and ashes smoldering. Now, this is important. Secondary succession starts with soil. In this case, ashes, which are rich in nutrients. All the nitrogen and carbon and phosphorus and everything that was in the body of these plant community was all turned to ash and returned to the soil. So now I've got soil, sunlight coming down, and it's rich in nutrients. So I've got soil, ashes, and of course, what we call a seed bank is there's all sorts of seeds that fell down into that soil over the years, and they're all just waiting dormant. So we've got exposed soil. I'm out of room, so I'm gonna write it up here. Of course, there's no shade, so now I've got sunlight. We got everything we need. Boom, immediately grass and flowers and stuff start to, in East Texas, this happens within weeks. And now I've got some of the trees coming. I've got some bushes, I've got grass, and I've got pioneer trees. I've got it all. A very diverse community. It happens immediately. My pioneer trees and my shade tolerant trees are growing together. Those pioneer trees grow a little bit faster, so they kind of come up first. But those shade tolerant trees, they're right there underneath them. And then before long, we're back to climax community. So this would be a timeline over thousands of years where you go from where an island is born to where you've got a forested island like this that has a climax community. But as I said, that could be thousands of years. And primary succession is really quite rare on the world these days. You can see it in the oceans when new islands are born, when volcanoes explode and a new island chain that the mountain builds and builds underwater and eventually breaks the surface. Sometimes you can see primary succession happening today, and there are videos of it, and I'm going to attach or link some there here. But most of what we see is disturbance and secondary succession. This can be man-made or it can be natural. It can be anything from a flood or a giant landslide or a forest fire like I've got here to a community clearing land with machines and everything and essentially resetting back to bare soil. And that would be a man-made disturbance. But either way, it's secondary succession because you started off with soil, seeds, and sunlight.